Alrighty, so here we go, boys and girls. It's the first preview of the brand new season and the first preview of the year. And you notice I am doing something a whole lot different compared to previous season. And this year I decided to go with a bit of a minimistic kind of approach, where instead of in past years where I have different boxes and basically talk about the information of the game and the head to head kind of thing, and I even switch boards, looking at the other boards of the remaining game. I decided to just kind of scrap that, and instead I decided to go with a very minimistic approach, which is not really talk about too much information on the board, but throughout the video I'll talk more about what this game really means, and kind of just some analysis in terms of how these game is. That way, obviously, these preview won't be super long, because that's one of the thing that is a problem when it comes to doing these preview. These preview maybe are super for long, and that people probably don't watch it. Or and the fact that the other issue is that it does take a little bit of a more hassle to do it the old way compared to this way, which is much faster to do. But with that being said, let us begin with the first game. And you notice I divided into three different columns, because I decided with three different column, we have the first column mostly being the early start in the 7:30 p.m. kickoff, and then the second column is the West Coast game and the 8:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff beyond that. And then of course the last column is going to be the Sunday game, and I'm going to pretty much do it similar to that, because each of these games are pretty much going to be divided in certain time set, and that most of the games will usually happen around these first two columns, because these first two columns is pretty much going to be the Saturday action, and then the last column is mostly the Sunday action. And if there isn't going to be a Sunday game, I'll pretty much mix it up in terms of how I do stuff. But with the first game we're going to talk about is LAFC versus Minnesota. So originally the first game was NYCFC versus Inter Miami, but that of course is being pushed back to a 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, and that doesn't really do me any favor, because that means that there's gonna be at 1.9 games that's gonna be happening at the same time. And you know what that usually mean? That usually means that, yeah, I'm gonna try my best to keep up, and I'll probably have to watch some highlights in terms of some of those games when I do the review. And I'm planning to do the review actually on the same night, at least one of the review, that is. But the first game, I'll definitely do an individual review, because this is the matinee game between LAFC versus Minnesota United. This game starts at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. All-time meeting 4-5-3 in favor of LAFC. Now, last time Minnesota had a game where they played their season opener as actually the first game ever by an MLS team. Yeah, that didn't go so well against the Seattle Sounders. They got absolutely thumped in that game. And coming into this game, I know it's a daunting task for this Loons team to have to face another LA team after the last LA team they faced. They got absolutely thumped by that team, and that team of course ends up to be the defending MLS Cup champion as well. But I am a little more confident coming into this one, mainly because I'm not sure if LAFC may be playing their strongest squad. Keep in mind, LAFC, they did play in the middle of the week, and this maybe could be an advantage for some of these teams playing against teams that play in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, especially teams that play on the road. That could be an advantage that they get to play a team that has a short rest. But it could also be a disadvantage, because some of those teams might already have reps compared to these teams that didn't play in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and it's almost a brand new start to them. But Minnesota might get the advantage, because LAFC play in the middle of the week, and it was a brutal midweek game, going up in Colorado in freezing temperature, and most likely they'll probably might have to start their strongest team again, because they're down 2-1 in aggregate in this. So maybe Street Trullo might think about I wouldn't say punting this game, but definitely do some squad rotation as well early on. Especially, it's always tough when you basically have to play the squad in such a quick amount of time, especially this early in the season when players are completely not back to match fitness. But that being said, despite that, I think LAFC will still be the favorites, because they're playing at home, and you got to also remember they have never lost when it comes to their season opener. They're perfect so far, 7-for-7 in their season opener, and this is going to be probably a tough for task than before. I mean, last year against Seattle was pretty tough as well, but they overcome it. But this time, with the fact that they're playing against a Minnesota team that many, including myself, have very good optimism that they can finish near the top four of the standings. And also, I'm gonna be interested to see whether or not we're gonna see some debut for this Minnesota team. We'll see if we might see some debut from some of their signing, like Romero or even Janae as well, or even that South Korean kid that we got this off season. We'll see how Minnesota will do in this game as well. Now, moving on to the first of what would be, I believe, yes, 6 games that happen at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, and the first one is the rematch of the playing round between Atlanta United versus Montreal. So all-time meeting 8-3-5 in favor of Atlanta, and this, of course, is also the debut of Ronnie Delia as the head coach for this Atlanta team. And there's going to be a lot of coaching debut as well because there's been a lot of coaching turnover throughout the season, and it's going to be interesting to see how these new head coach will do in their first ever game. But most importantly, this is a debut for a big name player that they got this off season in Emmanuel Latte, and also the return of Miguel Almiron. I feel like there's going to be a huge ovation when his name is being announced. He's definitely one of the biggest fan favorite, if not the biggest fan favorite of this Atlanta United team. And there's no doubt that Atlanta also well, Montreal obviously will want to get some revenge after losing in the playing round, that is, but there's no doubt that Atlanta is probably going to be heavy favorite in this one, and we'll see that this might be a game to showcase why Atlanta probably is truly back with all the big move that they made. The expectation once again is sky high for this Atlanta United team. And then we have FC Cincinnati versus the New York Red Bulls. So all-time meeting 8-3-5 in favor of the New York Red Bulls. So this is going to be an interesting start to the season and already an early test for the Red Bulls. Coming off of a surprising MLS Cup run, you wonder how they're going to follow up heading into this season, especially getting a couple a big signing with the likes of Eric Maxime Choupo-Moting. We'll see how he will do adjusting to life in MLS. But most importantly for Cincinnati, this is another case where this is a team that play relatively or play in the CONCACAF Champions Cup and play relatively well in that competition too. In fact, they were probably the biggest winner out of all the MLS team against CONCACAF opposition, winning 4-1 against Montegra, and that because of it will allow Pat Nolan to probably completely rest his guys on Wednesday, and that this might be one of the case alongside even the Seattle Sounders might be a team that they might not even have to worry about doing some squad rotation. So again, in a 3-day rest and especially coming back from Honduras, it's not going to be easy. The good news is just like LAFC, they get to play at home in this game, and again, there's got to be a lot of excitement for Cincinnati fans after seeing that display against Montegra, that pretty much all of their big name signing turns out to do well. Kevin Dinke was really good in that game. The same goes for Evander too, registering his first goal and first assist. Though it's going to be definitely tougher. They're going to be facing a much tougher defense in this one. That is the New York Red Bulls, because we know this Red Bulls team is very good on the defensive front, and overall should be a very good early season test for both of these teams. Then we have Columbus versus the Chicago Fire. So this, of course, is the Greg Berhalter derby in the first game since Greg Berhalter left the Columbus Crew to join the U.S. men's national team. Now that he's the head coach of Chicago, he's pretty much going back to the place where it all began and really kind of made himself a household name in the American soccer landscape. All-time meeting though, it's a 29, 25, and 23 recurring favorite of the Chicago Fire. Now, obviously, it is a bit daunting for the Fire to have to go on the road to face against one of the toughest places to get points. I mean, we've already mentioned before how this Columbus team they do not lose at home often under Wilfred Nancy. In fact, I think they only lost only 4 games at home ever since Wilfred Nancy have took charge. And I know this is a Columbus team that it will be very interesting to see whether or not I wouldn't say they might keep up with the pace that they've been in because losing the likes of Cucho Hernandez and Christian Ramirez, those two guys are really big loss for this team, and you maybe expect there could be some regression shown by this Columbus team, but nevertheless, facing against a revitalized Fire team that I know many people said that this team can definitely do well this season. Maybe this is finally the year that they end that cycle of just not being able to make it to the playoff, and Greg Berhalter finally get this team to the promised land of ending that longest active playoff drought of any MLS team. But keep in mind, this is still a relatively new Fire team. They did a lot of roster change, and when you decide to do that, it's always tough to try to implement the team and see how it's going to do. It's almost like they're kind of like an expansion team, similar to what I'll call about another team that seems like kind of an expansion team heading into this year with all the changes that they made. So yeah, overall, it's going to be very interesting. And I also wonder, when Greg Berhalter does return to Columbus for the first time, we'll see whether or not if there's going to be some cheers or boos when he is being announced. I'm assuming there's probably going to be some cheer, knowing that he's the former head coach of Columbus and brought them some good things for the team. But there probably is going to be some boos because obviously he didn't do so well with the U.S. men's national team. Moving on, we got DC versus Toronto FC. So all-time record 18, 12, and 13 in favor of DC United. So this, of course, is the debut of Robin Fraser time with this TFC side. And unlike Greg Berhalter in his debut of him had to go on the road on a daunting task against Columbus, for Robin Fraser, it gets a little bit of an easier game against DC United. I mentioned that in the beginning of the season, I don't really have a lot of faith on this DC team, despite all the changes that they made. I mean, this is just going to be another season where they're begging Christian Benteke to do a carry job to at least keep them relevant this year, and not to mention the struggle at home. We saw last year as well. It's hard to believe they did not win a single home game for pretty much majority of the second half of the season, and you kind of wonder why they eventually miss out on the playoff offs as well. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting one, and especially we'll see whether or not if Robin Fraser can do something similar to what we saw last year with John Herman able to revitalize this misfits of team and get off to a surprising early start, and hopefully maybe keep it up as long as possible, because as many people, including myself, predicted, this feels like it's a TFC team that I think every Eastern Conference team, when they see when they're going to be playing against Toronto FC, they would feel like this is kind of like the free points of the season for them. Now, moving on to the game that was supposed to be the first game of this brand new season is Inter Miami versus NYCFC. And again, I don't understand why moving 5 hours later in this game makes a huge difference, despite the fact that their kickoff of the game against Sporting KC was a day late. But nevertheless, all-time meeting between both of these teams. NYCFC actually has Inter Miami number. In fact, Miami has only won once against NYCFC. And what's even more impressive is the fact that they still are able to get resort against Inter Miami, even when Messi and friends is on this Inter Miami team. Now, that being said, this is also going to be a game where we'll see whether or not if Javier Mascherano might start to rest some of his guy, and this is kind of maybe the first test of what I think I expect for this Inter Miami team. The fact that they might need to think about maybe resting some of their star, because this is going to be something that we're going to see a lot throughout the season, where they're going to be playing 3 games in 7 day as well, and after just a frigid cold night that they had to do in Kansas City, and while they of course got the win there, um it was just such a frigid night to a point where how is that going to really affect this team, especially with an older squad in such a short amount of rest? So I expect this is a big decision that Javier Mascherano might make. He might not even play some of his best player, or maybe have them come off the bench, or maybe even have them subbed off before, because I think that this is the difficult thing that Javier Mascherano has to bring, especially with the way that you want to put it on a show for the fans that still pay a lot of money to see Inter Miami play week in and week out. But at the same time, he's got to think about how they're going to be battling in multiple competition this year, and they just simply can't play Messi and his friends game in and game in as well. Which that means that does give NYCFC a good chance to get one over the team that they seem so that to have a good history City, and we'll also see how Pascal Janssen will do in his first game with NYCFC as well. Now, moving on, we got Orlando City versus the Philadelphia Union. So this is the final game that starts at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, and there's also another game that feature a new head coach that is making his debut. It's kind of hard to believe these four games all feature games with head coach making his debut, and in this case, it's the debut of Bradley Carnell, and kind of a new era for this Philadelphia Union team as they're going through a bit of a transitional period. Now, it's not going to be easy that they have to face against Orlando City. That Orlando want to get off to a good start this season. That's been the problem for Oscar Pereira team in the last 2 years, where they have been getting off to terrible start. And most importantly, they hope that some of their new pieces that they bought this offseason will turn out to not only be a hit, but also get off to a good start as well. But yeah, we'll see how this game, of course, will turn out. And most importantly, we'll see how Bradley Carnell, his debut is going to be. Remember last time when he made a debut with a team and took charge of a team. Yeah, his first 5 games were all wins against St. Louis City. And I'm not saying that he probably he can't do that again with the Philadelphia Union, but it is very highly unlikely that of course, is going to happen. Now, moving on to the West Coast kickoff and also the 8:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff, and we have 4 games that start at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. First one starting with Austin versus Sporting KC. So speaking of coaching debut, that kind of continued with this game where Nico Estevez is going to make his coaching debut against Sporting KC at home. All-time meeting 5-1 and 3 in favor of Austin. Sporting KC, of course, one of those teams that play in the middle of the week and play in the frigid weather against Inter Miami and lost that game as well. So we'll see how Peter Vermes can bounce back in this game against an Austin team that there's a lot of hype around this Austin team, especially on the attacking end with the debut of Uzuni and Vasquez. It's going to be interesting to see how they would do, and also what kind of system that Nico Estevez is gonna play as well. I'll be surprised that he might play the same system that he did with Dallas compared to maybe doing his first couple of games with Austin, because Austin fans, when they first hear that hiring, it was an underwhelming hiring. They didn't really quite like it, and most part is because he tends to be a little bit too defensive doing his time with Dallas, and for a team that want to play an attacking brand of soccer, I don't think Austin fans will accept Nico Estevez once again playing boring style soccer that can limit the impact of this attack, which I think could be one of the better one in the Western Conference can have heading into this season. And then we have the Texas Derby. So as I mentioned before, this is one of the rare situations where we have a rivalry game straight off the back in the season opener. We have seen it before where there's been rivalry game, but this might be the first time where we see El Capitan being played in the first game of the season between the Dynamo and FC Dallas. All-time meeting in El Capitan, 18, 21, and 14 in favor of Dallas. One of the thing about the Texas Derby in the first game of the Copa Tijas, that is that there's been a lot of draw in these meetings whenever the Dynamo and Dallas play. In fact, 4 of the last 5 games have ended in a draw as well. So we'll see whether or not if that is going to be the case. And also, this is another game where we feature a debut as well, the debut of Peter Quill as well for FC Dallas. We'll see how he's going to do. And most importantly, the debut of Lucho Acosta too. It's going to be very strange seeing him wearing a Dallas jersey as well. Of course, he was part of a free team blockbuster kind of domino move that we saw throughout the off season as well, and we'll see how he's going to do in his first game on the road against a Houston Dynamo side that both of these teams wants to get off to not only a good start this season, but imagine getting off to a good start this season and you beat your rival and already have a leg up in the Copa Tijas standings. Yeah, I'm pretty sure both of these teams would want to win this game. Now, moving on, we got Nashville SC versus the New England Revolution. So finally, we get to a game where it doesn't actually feature a debut of a new head coach. Although, unless if you count BJ Callahan making his season opener debut, as he, of course, was hired in the middle of the season. But yeah, all-time meeting between both of these teams, 4-3 and 2 in favor of the New England Revolution. So it's kind of an interesting one in a way where, for New England, just like what I said about Chicago, they made so many changes this offseason. They might as well be called an expansion team as well, alongside with San Diego FC, and we'll see how a newly shaped New England team would look under Taylor Porter, and then of course for Nashville under BJ Callahan in his first full season. I know he really wants to play that possession style of soccer on this Nashville team, and I'm pretty sure This team had a whole preseason to kind of prepare for that. We'll see whether or not if they do so, because there's no doubt that this Nashville team is trying to move away from the Gary Smith style of play, and that while this team definitely started to look more and more like a team that BJ Callahan has rather than still just a Gary Smith team, there are still a lot of players on this team that used to play for this team under Gary Smith. And again, one of the issue why last year why BJ Cowan didn't really have a lot of success in terms to implement his philosophy is that these guys that play for Nashville and play under Gary Smith, it's almost like it's been uh imprinted in their minds that they're gonna play the defensive style of play, and now that they're kind of moving away from that, we'll see whether or not if they can have the good success. And most importantly, we'll see if Honey Mukhtar can have a good start to the season, which is something we did not see last season or the previous year as well. And then moving on, we got St. Louis City versus the Colorado Rapids. So now we're back in terms of talk about debut head coaches. We're gonna see the debut of Olaf Malmberg for St. Louis City, and they're gonna be facing against a Rapids team that also play in a frigid game at home, but and unfortunately also lose in or actually no, they didn't lose, they actually won their frigid game against LAFC, so they're definitely going to have some confidence heading into this game against the St. Louis side that, as I mentioned many times before, this is the St. Louis side that has so much momentum after a decent finish to the end of last season. But as I mentioned many times as well, just because they have so much momentum in the previous year doesn't mean the fact that it's going to carry into the next season. We have seen before where teams have decent momentum to finish the second half of the season, and more times than not, sometimes that does not carry into the new season, especially with St. Louis having a new head coach, and we'll see whether if they do play that similar style of play that John Hagworth played when he was taking charge of this team in an interim basis and really got this team back to where they should be at least a competitive team in the Western Conference. And then we move on into the next game, which is the San Jose Earthquakes versus RSL. So finally, again, we're going to get to a game. Well, actually, I say we're finally getting a game where there's no new head coach. I forgot that the Quakes, of course, have the debut of Bruce Arena. How did I forget that is the case? Consider that is one of my team. But all-time meetings 17, 12, and 15 in favor of the Quakes, and of all these games that happened in the opening weekend, this is one that I think a lot of people have not talked about, the fact that this is actually the Chicho Arango derby, and maybe the Chicho Arango revenge game as well, because you know that not only Chicho Arango wants to make his name and get off to a good start to the season, and remind everybody that that second half of the season was mainly because he was butting heads with Pablo Mastroeni and was really forcing his way out with RSL. You know he really wants to not only make a great debut with the Quakes, but he definitely wants to stick it to RSL and really stick it to Pablo Mastroeni face as well. So if that of course is the case, I'm definitely very excited as a Quakes fan. Again, this season I think this team is going to be very fun to watch, mainly because while this team is very top heavy on the attack, there's going to be a lot of question on the defensive end, and I'm hoping Bruce Arena will create a good structure where as bad as the defense could be this season, it could mitigate the fact that the attack will really carry this team. But yeah, overall, this should be a very exciting game. For those that also asked me if I'm actually attending this game, unfortunately, no, I'm not going to be attending this one, mainly because for the first week of the season, I usually want to just stay home and watch all of these games and do a review after, because I miss watching all these MLS games happening at the same time. I haven't been able to do that since decision day in October. So it's the fact that I'm gonna just stay home, watch all of these games, and this is why I also said I can definitely do the review of the Saturday night action after the game is over, because I'll just watch some of the highlights of this and basically do what I usually do with the review, doing the first part and then do part number two most likely on Sunday. But speaking of Saturday night, the last game on Saturday night, besides the Quakes and RSL, is Seattle versus Charlotte FC. So if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the only game that we see an interconference matchup, because all these rest of these games are in the same conference as well. And it's kind of interesting the fact that Seattle is a team that is involved in the first interconference matchup, and they will be the last team to be involved in an interconference matchup, because the last game of the season, I believe, they play a team in the Eastern Conference as well. So because of that, there's not really a lot of all-time meeting. 1-1 and 0 is the all-time meeting between both of these teams. But this is kind of a one that, it feels like this could be a game where, if you're a person that likes to see a lot of goals being scored, yeah, this is probably not the game to do so. And that kind of is the case for when you watch Charlotte game. They're a very good defensive team, and when you have two good defensive team go at each other, it should be maybe kind of a low scoring game as I expected. Though when you look at the attacking front, both of these teams had some good decent attacking weapons as well, and especially after Seattle got a big victory in Guatemala against Antigua, there will be some confident that they'll do well, especially so they're two big names that they got this off season combined in the goal scoring and assist chart in Jesus Ferreira and Paul Arriola in that game against Antigua. But like I said about FC Cincinnati, it's going to be much difficult to face against an Antigua defense compared to a Charlotte defense. That these by the way are two teams that finished last season with the best defensive record in the league. So something tells me this could be a really good game, and yeah, we'll see how this of course will turn out between both of these teams. Now, moving on to the Sunday kickoff. So we got two games that is happening in the Sunday kickoff, and that's kind of is the case for most days where we'll have two games. There's going to be some times where there's only going to be one game, and that one game, of course, is the feature Sunday night soccer game. This is the first time we've seen Apple TV decide to have a feature game in a week, and I like it when they decide to do that, because I think to have just a feature game like this will get the ratings and the eye pay attention to these games as well. But the first Sunday game is the rematch of the playing round that we saw last year in the Western Conference. So how about it when it comes to the schedule maker in the season opener, where not only we see the rematch of last year Eastern Conference playing round, but we also see the rematch of the Western Conference playing round in the first week as well. So yeah, this game starts at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. All-time meeting 18, 9, and 13 in favor of the Portland Timbers. And there's no doubt that the Timbers, they are hungry to get some revenge against Vancouver. I mean, they are definitely licking their chops to try and avenge of that 5-0 thrashing that happened just a couple of months ago, and especially against a Whitecaps team that, yeah, they not only has a long travel back from Costa Rica, but it was a very sad long travel back too after giving up that late goal to lose that first leg against Saprissa. So yeah, there's no doubt that there should be no mercy that's being shown by this Timber side. And remember, last year in the season opener, the Timbers were 4-0 up against Colorado in the first 30 minutes. And while that game they kind of eventually led off, I don't think this is going to be the same case in this game against the Vancouver Whitecaps. If they find themselves 4-0 up after 30 minutes again, they're going to score five or six goals too, because they definitely have not forget about what happened in the playing round, suffering not only the most embarrassing loss last season, but probably the most embarrassing loss they've ever suffered at Providence Park. And then finally, the feature game of this game that will happen on Sunday Night Soccer is none other than the LA Galaxy versus San Diego FC. So it's not surprising this is the feature game, because you have the defending MLS Cup champion playing in this one against the new boys of MLS, and the 30th expansion team that is going to be playing their first ever game in MLS, that is San Diego FC. This game starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Again, it's the first ever meeting. And anytime when it's the first ever meeting between an expansion team over a team that's been there for a long time, usually you would say that the team that's been there for a very long time does get the victory. Or the last time when we saw an expansion team play, and that of course was St. Louis City playing against Austin. St. Louis, of course, were able to win that and become one of the rare expansion team to win their first ever game. In fact, prior to that, only LAFC was the last time to go on the road and win in their expansion in their expansion season to win and expand in their first ever game. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if San Diego can replicate that, although it's not going to be easy. I mean, when you have to face against a defending MLS Cup champion as your first game of life in MLS, I mean, that's kind of like almost like thrown into deep into the water and hope that you can either sink or swim. And I think this game will also maybe tell us a lot about how Mikey Veras will do for the San Diego side, because with all the roster they're build and all the tactics that they're trying to set up in this first game against the Galaxy. We'll see whether or not if it will be successful. And even if it's not successful, even if I think that the Galaxy is going to absolutely trump San Diego in this one, at least San Diego does get some data, and the fact that, again, this is a team that when it comes to an expansion team, they'll probably just be happy to be here, at least in the next couple of games. But this is also a kind of time where it could be a learning lesson in terms of what they need to address after the roster that they built, and what they think that they done well, that could be a foundation of maybe a decent expansion season heading into this year. But there you have it. That is pretty much it when it comes to finishing up the preview of all of these games. And I think it's like 30 minutes in terms of preview. So not bad in terms of how long I took in terms of looking at all of these games. Remember, I have to look one more game than previous year as well. So, don't be surprised that the preview sometimes could be a little bit longer, but still definitely shorter compared to previous season. But as always, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the opening weekend's matchup of the 2025 MLS regular season? And as always, let me know in the comments below your prediction for some of these games as well. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.